Welcome to Suddenly Different, where we explore stories and strategies for life when it doesn't go to plan. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, inviting you to join me on this journey. What happens when your body no longer lets you participate in the world? When sound becomes pain, light becomes unbearable, and even the slightest stress tips you into collapse. In today's episode of Suddenly Different, I'm joined by Jo Morton from the Good Energy Room, an embodied advocate who knows all too well what it means when your nervous system hits the brakes and refuses to restart. Jo's life was hijacked by a hard-to-diagnose condition, dysautonomia, that left her bedridden, unable to tolerate light, sound, movement, or even the basic tasks of daily living. Her body shut down on every level: physical, emotional, sensory, and medical answers were few and far between. But what happened next is where the power of this story lives. Over the last 2 years, Jo has used enhanced energy system technology, EE system technology, a deep energetic healing protocol to gradually rebuild her multiple body systems, restoring not just her ability to function, but her right to live fully again. If you've ever felt invisible in your illness, overwhelmed by the mystery of your body, or desperate for something beyond symptom suppression, this conversation is for you. And I know this all too well because I have dysautonomia too. And I met Jo and she provided me with hope. And the reason this podcast exists is because of Jo and the business that she started with her husband. So I am a great fan and owe so much of my healing journey to Jo. So apart from that, Jo, welcome. It is beyond a privilege to have you here on Suddenly Different. And as I said, I am forever grateful to you and Adam.
Thank you. It feels very exciting on many levels to chat with you because number one, I never imagined I would use a computer again or speak to people outside of my immediate family. I never imagined I would work or run a business again. I never thought I'd do a podcast. It's my very first podcast. And I'm so thrilled that you have gotten to the point where you are creating this and sharing this with the world. And it's just going to help so many people. So thank you too.
Thank you. Okay, so let us jump into this enigma. Take us to the moment when you knew something was seriously wrong, or even before that time when you thought that things weren't quite right. What were the signs that your body was giving you that it was slowly shutting down?
It was a slow decline over about 6 years. After I had our third child, I had appendicitis. And after I recovered from that, it seems like there was some residual sepsis, which really I was never the same again after that. I assumed it was having a third baby and being tired, but really I never recovered. Fever, other viral things, stressful things. I think a lot of things compound on top of each other. And essentially now I'm learning that mast cell activation syndrome gets triggered, the body starts reacting, and the nervous system starts shutting down. So it was sort of years of being tired, sitting on the ground, saying no to nighttime things, just slowly, going back into my cave, I guess, and just thinking that everyone felt like this. Isn't everyone this tired? But essentially, at the end of 2020, I went and got a blood test. I thought it must be low iron, low everything, because my body's just not working like it should. And after I had that blood test, I was exhausted. I went to bed and I didn't get up again. Essentially, there were things got a little bit better, then they got a little bit worse, and then they got worse and worse and worse and worse, and I was essentially in bed. So, long journey.
Yes, I can imagine. With 3 children and a husband and family who wouldn't have understood what was going on,
It's scary
doctors
for
who wouldn't have
everybody.
understood.
No, and I think that the mast cell activation syndrome link is not understood widely at all, and how it can look different in different people. And the dysautonomia piece, there are similarities, but it can affect people differently. Some people it's, I had POTS, the low blood pressure and the high heart rate, couldn't stand up, the chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, the pain everywhere, huge digestive issues. I couldn't eat much food, absorption issues. So food, water, it just wasn't being absorbed and used by my body. It affects all sorts of systems, and it's very tricky finding people that understand this and believe it. I was very unwell, but nothing would show up on an X-ray or in an MRI. So it's very tricky to see.
Yes, yes, and I understand that, and many of the people who've been affected by the COVID virus or the vaccine injured people have had mast cell mast cell activation syndrome happen to them. So there's a lot of people in the community who suddenly have an experience like you, but you didn't get yours from COVID. Yours was before COVID.
Yes. And I think there are always going to be different triggers. For some people, it's a virus. I had other viruses. I had Epstein-Barr virus and, other flu viruses. I had the sepsis going on and the infection. Essentially, it can be a different trigger for people, but it can activate this reactivity within the body and essentially shut down of various systems.
Can you describe, and if it's too triggering, it's fine, but can you describe what it was like for you to be in that hypersensitivity, to be closed off in your room? The furthest you'd go was the bathroom and you needed help. You had to use a wheelchair and you could barely eat.
It was quite, to begin with, you sort of think, well, this is probably going to be a couple of weeks. Must be the flu or something. I'll just wait it out. Might be a couple of weeks. And then it keeps going. Yeah, okay, something's a bit weird. Maybe a couple of months. You go and see the doctors and they say if it gets to 6 months, then it's classed as chronic fatigue syndrome. And they also tell you it's probably never going to go away. And essentially it just, to begin with, it didn't feel like it was going to be 3 years. Essentially, it's every day is a moment in time itself to get through. But it got to the point after we felt a little bit of hope, when things got a little bit better and then things got much, much worse. It was quite terrifying. I mean, it's like being trapped, not only in, my own room, but in my body. And it's like, I I can't get out of here, of this situation. I can't find anyone who understands it or who has paved the way, who I can't see any footsteps in front of me. Therefore, I don't know if there's a way out. And I got to the point where I couldn't sit up unassisted. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't walk. I couldn't read or write or look out the window if the leaves were blowing. I had to wear sunnies and a hat inside 24/7. I had a neck brace on. I couldn't hold my head up properly. If it was bright or windy outside, we had to close the curtains. I couldn't have my kids in my room because my body just couldn't handle energy and movement and emotions, and just everything felt like I was being electrocuted. It just felt like I remember we have sometimes people burn off around the neighborhood and there's some smoke outside. And if I was terrified if people were going to burn off, and if they were, my husband Adam would have to go and get scarves and towels and we'd have to put them all around the windows, window frames and under the door. And it was literally like this, God, I have to survive this, because if the smoke came in, it really felt like I was being electrocuted. It was crazy. So thank goodness I have a wonderful husband who believed everything, who understood as much as I could tell him. There were days where I could only say 5 words at a time. I'd want to know how, one of our kids went at basketball or something, and I'd say, tell me 5 words. How'd he go? And then he'd start to say, and sometimes even that, I couldn't handle the vibration of his voice. It just felt like it was attacking my nervous system. And sometimes I'd say, could you sing it to me? And he'd sing it to me. And it was the most beautiful thing. And even that, I was learning that it felt different. It felt different in my body. One of the real realizations that I had through all this was it's like having a really, really zoomy microscope into how words and feelings and energy affects every cell in our body. And so I noticed that if I sat there and felt fear and dread and terror all day, that was a very hard existence, and I could not do that. I just couldn't do it. I could not sustain all those feelings all the time. Therefore, I had to figure out how to change them. And it's a very, very hard thing to do, to try to change them when you're in that state. And so to
Yes.
begin with, I could not even think of thoughts. Like I could not create my own thoughts because it was purely just me staring at my wall. Couldn't look at a phone or a TV or any kind of screen. Couldn't read a book. I was looking at my wall, and I had to find ways of having a better thought. And that was one of the biggest learnings in all of this. But to begin with, it was so difficult. I used to ask Adam to come in at the end of the day when he bought me, my food and my medicines and all the stuff. And I'd get him to just give me one, just tell me what's good. Something that's good. And he'd say something, and sometimes he'd start to say it, and I'd be like, okay, like that's enough. And then that would land and feel a bit better. Yeah, he's very
Yeah.
wonderful.
Look at that smile. Amazing. You've told me, we've spoken so many times because there's such similarities. I know I wasn't anywhere near as bad as you, but my brain didn't function. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch televisions. I couldn't follow a plot. I couldn't take news. I couldn't do anything like that myself. And at the beginning, I would put on the TV Flying Doctors or Love Boat, because they have music sort of all the way behind, and it's just orchestra music. And then I would face on the couch, I would face my face into the couch. So I wasn't watching, but I just familiarity with a time, a memory that was safe.
Yeah, I feel a bit like that when I see the Brady Bunch or something.
Yeah.
It just lands in a place that feels safe.
And it's really amazing. But I think it's so interesting because of your hypersensitivity to words, right? So you're really feeling the words. And I always feel that there's different poundage in different words, but you felt it and you knew the vibration of the word.
And we literally had to change the way we spoke to each other, which is also why I had to completely shut off everybody. I couldn't see anybody. I could not, I had to figure this out. Like I had to figure out how to change the words myself. And then I had to figure out how to interact with people because I knew that it would all be very triggering. So Adam and I slowly worked on it and thought, well, how do we learn how to communicate differently so it doesn't feel like danger, so that it feels okay? And he did some studying of neuroplasticity. There was a brain retraining program called DNRS that he went through, and we learnt things from this to help us. But essentially, we started just with when we would see each other, whenever he came into my room, the standard thing that we used to say would be, "Hi, how you going?" or "How are you?" And that would trigger body scanning. How am I? What's wrong? I'm going to tell you all the things that are wrong right now. And you're probably going to tell me something bad that happened, and it triggers this whole cycle. And we thought, well, how do we change that? Because that's just manners, right? That's just caring about somebody. And so we discovered that if we say, "Hi, nice to see you. Nice to see you too." That's it. That's all you need. "Hi, nice to see you." If we, eventually, once we got to the stage where we could talk on the phone to each other, "Hi, nice to talk to you. Nice to talk to you too." Then we'd start the conversation.
So that is such a powerful observation, is that if you get asked, because I always ask, "How are you? How are you going?"
Yes. Yes.
But it does, it causes the check-in
Yeah.
when you're
Scanning.
really sick and you're hypersensitive. Not
Yes.
everybody, but that's really, really interesting. Lesson
And
number
really, it's
15
the
so
last
far.
thing that you want to, when you see someone, when you've been sick forever and you need to talk to them, the last thing you want to talk about is how you feel.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure there's more to me than that, but really, this is all it becomes my identity. What's wrong with me now? Oh, you poor thing. I really, really, really hated pity, which is also why I
Yes.
closed off from everybody. I did not want them pitying me and giving me puppy dog eyes. And like, I'm like, well, I can work through this. I can sit here and suffer by myself because that's my existence. But I don't want other people to extend my suffering into their world and into their thoughts and into, I don't want them talking about me and my suffering because essentially to me, that makes it feel bigger. So I did feel like I had to keep it to myself just for self-preservation.
When your body is kind of betraying you, really it's trying to protect you. It was actually trying to save your life, and it did a bloody good job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story that I'd love you to tell before we start talking about dysautonomia and the diagnosis part, because lately you've told me a couple of stories that I've absolutely adored. And one of them was when you first left home and you went to a park and you had an experience with a tree, and being in the hypersensitive state that you were in. I'd love you to describe the tree.
When I was in bed for just 100% of the time, trying to come up with some ways of helping my nervous system feel safe, helping it get into that healing state. One of the things that we used to do, Adam helped me with, was visualizing. And visualizing good things, something good. We both love trees, and we had these, wild, amazing visualizations of going around the world and finding all the big, beautiful trees and hugging them. And we just find a lot of peace and pleasure in that. And so there's a park near us that has massive, massive trees. And I visualized about them so much and how they would feel and how they would look and how I would feel when I was there. And eventually, when I was getting better and just trying to get to the point where I could sit up, get in the wheelchair, get to the car, go in the car somewhere and be in the world. It was a very, very traumatic journey getting there, but I really wanted to be able to go to a park and see these trees. So we did it one day. It was my very first outing out of the house to go somewhere other than to get an IV, which was a great help, by the way. And I got out of the car into the wheelchair. The whole thing felt very, very uncomfortable, quite awful, really, because everything is painful. Everything is, scary. It feels quite unsafe still, but I wanted to do it. And we got there, and I had in my head, I want to go and see these trees, but I forgot that there was like a bumpy gravel path up to them. And so it was also me sustaining being pushed in the wheelchair over this rocky, bumpy path. It felt like, the most dangerous car ride ever. But we got there up to the trees and I sat there and I thought, I really want to touch this tree. this is my goal for the whole week. I want to touch this tree. And we found one where we could wheel right up to it because I literally couldn't take steps. I could just stand up supported, but that's it. And I went up to it and I touched this tree and I had my hat and my sunnies on and my neck brace and, kind of holding the wheelchair and holding the tree. And it just felt incredible. Like it felt like a person. It felt like this beautiful, supportive, grounded, wise person. And I felt really supported, even though my biggest challenge at that stage was supporting myself, trying to be upright and standing when I was next to the tree and touching it and soaking its energy. I felt really supported, which was really special. Got a photo and that was it for a couple of days. I went home and recovered and all that, but I felt like it gave me life, just having this experience and being a part of the world that knows what it's doing. There's no emotions in a tree. There's no surprises in a tree. It's there. It grows. It's okay with whatever the weather. It's okay when it's windy. It's okay when it's hot. It's just like this wisdom and this intelligence that has it more figured out than we do, I think.
Wow. Wow. That experience is just such a wonderful experience. And the fact that you were willing to go through the pain, you knew the pain, you knew the struggle that was going to be there, but the benefit and the mental element of it, and trees are amazing. Trees are absolutely amazing. And if you do actually sit down and have a moment with a tree, it is a very, very special experience. So, that's lovely. I just adore it. And I know that you saw that tree again recently when you went
Yes.
and visited.
Yes. So last weekend we went and took the dogs for a walk there and, I'm walking, I'm going where I like. I'm like a normal person, not this struggling, suffering person in the wheelchair with all the pillows falling out of the car and, I'm back. I would look like I'm back to normal, walking the dogs there. And my kids said, "Oh, look, it's your tree. Let's go see your tree." It's so interesting when I'm back into life and going somewhere with a mission. I'm taking the dogs for a walk along this path. It doesn't quite look the same. And I think when you're in those really, really intrinsic moments where, call it illness, depression, suffering, those times where you're really alone inside, I think they do actually hold a lot deeper connection and meaning because you're not worried about other people and you're not there for anyone else. It's just I think it's part of the survival thing, but it was quite magical when I was there because that's all I could do. And when I went back, it was still lovely, but I knew that actually I want to keep walking because I'm taking the dogs for a walk.
I can walk. That's amazing. So let us talk about dysautonomia. So it's notoriously misunderstood. It's hard to diagnose, and no one speciality takes responsibility for knowing about it. So how long did it take for you to receive any form of diagnosis or understanding of what was going on, other than the chronic fatigue? If you've got it for more than 6 months, you've got it and you've got it for life.
Yeah. It was about 6 months from when I crashed. So I was in bed permanently. It was about 6 months until we found a doctor who knew about it, is wonderful and understands it, knows about all the related systems, is a wonderful guidepost, I guess. Do this, try that. So I went to a regular doctor and they initially said, "Oh, if it is chronic fatigue, you should have a talk to one of these invisible illness places where they have coaches to teach you about it," because we had no idea. So I spoke to Active Health Clinic who were wonderful in the education. I was very, very cognitively absent. I have all the handouts and everything. We had Zoom calls. I could hardly look at the computer. I had to sit there, and even just sitting in front of the computer was painful and it was very difficult. So I feel like as much as they had lots of information to share with me, I have very limited capacity to take it in. Adam would listen, and we learnt a bit about that and about POTS as well, which gave us some clues. And then she ended up suggesting our doctor, who was great. We also had a naturopath who was good and understander. It was great. And I slowly developed a little team of people who understood and helped me navigate things. But there was no silver bullet. There was no one medication, supplement, treatment, therapy. It was like, try this, it'll either work or it won't. But that was sort of, you'll either get better or you get worse.
Did you have to go into hospital through emergency a few times?
Yeah, went into hospital, and I really thought there's something wrong with my brain. I thought there must be something in there that's, things are not working. I can't speak. I had to hold my arms within my body. If I put my hand outside my body, my brain didn't know where my hand was, and it felt awful. And so I basically just had to keep my hands here all the time. And I really thought there was something wrong with my brain. So we went to hospital. We got the full body MRI, CTs, X-rays, blood tests, everything, and it came back as clear. There's no tumor there, which is good news. They gave me the neurological geriatric specialist because of the extent of my neurological issues. And I thought, he's going to come in with some answers, and he knows this stuff, and he's going to have a solution for me. And he came in and looked at my scans, and he said, if you were as sick as you say you are, you'd be dead by now. And I went, wow, whoa. It's like, okay. I had a big awakening in that moment, and he sat there and he told me that I was choosing this, that there's nothing stopping me from getting up and having a shower right now. I hadn't had a shower for 6 months. He just said that it was my choice. And we were just quite gobsmacked. And from there, we essentially went home on Easter Sunday, happy Easter, in a pile of hopelessness. And all right, they gave me more drugs to try. They said, try this, have some Valium, have, all this stuff. Try that, do some Pilates, you'll be right. And essentially I just felt completely alone, completely let down. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I've just created this. Why on earth would I create this? How do I even do that? If I've created it, how do I change it? And that was a very, very, very dark few months from there. I didn't know if I was going to sit up again. I was reacting to all of the medication. The medication just kept crushing my nervous system, which made everything worse and further away. And it was really just surviving for a few months. One thing I did find out in hospital was that the IVs made me feel a little bit better, because I had very low blood pressure. So I got home and we found a beautiful, beautiful IV nurse who came into our house and came and gave me IVs twice a week. And that ended up being my favorite thing. That was the only thing it felt like it was hydrating my brain again. It had been a very long time since I'd felt like it felt like concrete, it felt like things were hydrating and starting to work. And I kept doing that, and she was just so wonderful. She had experience with lots of POTS patients and understood the autoimmune, invisible illness type thing. So she was great. I ended up, and another goal I had was to go down to her clinic, IV by the Sea in Macrae. And we ended up going down there, and the car ride had to put a scarf in the window. It was a big challenge to overcome. I felt like I didn't enjoy the process of these things, but I felt so good when I'd done them. So it was a real making friends with fear, I guess, and just getting out there and giving things a try because it felt like progress, not because it felt good yet.
So for anyone who's listening who has experienced chronic fatigue or long COVID or anything like that and been gaslit by the Western medicine system, it is they're ignorant. They do not understand the nervous system. They do not understand how the systems work with each other. So it is very, very sad to say that Googling it yourself is actually more informed than
Mm.
if you wait to find the magical person who will listen to you. I've been fortunate with some of my doctors, but not all of them. Let us talk about your turning point. What led you to explore energy-based healing? Was there a moment of there's nothing else apart from the IV, so I've got to try it, or what happened?
Essentially, even with the IVs, they were helping, but there's only a certain amount of time that the veins are going to allow it, you know? So I knew that I had to make the most of this time. I had some wonderful, wonderful, wonderful healers and therapists, and they were helping me, but I just wasn't getting to the point where everything was restoring and really healing. It was keeping me there, keeping me going, but it's like, how do I get to the next point? And I knew inside that it was because my nervous system was in the fight or flight survival state. And it switches everything off. You learn a lot through this time, with things you come across, but essentially the mitochondria shuts down. There's no energy to move and energy to change. And when I heard about the energy enhancement system like a year before or so, I thought that sounds really interesting. There wasn't one in Victoria at that stage. There was one in Queensland. And the thing that stuck in my memory was that they said they had studies that showed that it increased mitochondria function by 400%. And I thought, that sounds like an easier way to increase mitochondria function rather than fasting or something that I knew I couldn't sustain. So it piqued my interest, and a place opened in Ringwood called Essential Healing Centre. And it's ironic because the idea of going into a room with computer screens with rainbow scrolling lights on them, I couldn't look out the window. I couldn't look at a computer or a phone. I thought, well, this is going to kill me. I don't know how I can do it. I don't know how I can handle it. And so Adam went and checked it out. He said it was actually very relaxing, had a snooze. He was exhausted, so that's easy to do for him. And he said, I think you'd be okay as long as you don't look at them, because you don't have to. It's not part of it. You can look at the floor, look at something else. And so we went out there and we tried it out. They're very wheelchair friendly. It was lovely. They were so friendly. It's a beautiful little quiet room with some recliner chairs. There's some screens in the corners that create the energy field in the room, which is a coherent, healthy mental energy. Essentially, I just sat there I had my hat, my sunnies on, put a little scarf over my hat. So I was in my little cave and just sat there. I remember looking at the fake plant opposite me and just being there. And that in itself felt quite successful for me because it was something in the world that my body was okay with. And I was like, there was some pain. It was still quite painful to sit and just be in that position, but it felt doable. And then we left and Adam asked me how I felt. See, we didn't do this very often. We usually did not talk about how we felt. And he said, oh, how'd you find it? How are you feeling? And I said, I think I feel a bit more like myself. And then I thought, that's a weird thing to say. I would love to be able to get up and start walking around. That's not happening yet, but okay, we'll see what's next. And we kept going. I also got a cold near the start. I hadn't had a cold in 3 years because my immune system was, revving. And that in itself felt pretty exciting because I'm like, this is something that a normal person's body does. This is like a normal immune response. Cool. And I got a bit excited. I'd be like, I have a fever. Look at this. It just felt like progress, very sore throat, didn't feel great, but it felt like progress, which was exciting. And as that cleared, the cold cleared, the clarity started returning, and it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. It's really like things started switching on, and like the electrical programs, I guess, started switching on and communicating with each other. It really just kept going. It was really gentle. I kept going and having sessions because I was noticing this change, and I was noticing that it was doing something, and I was okay. It wasn't sending me backwards. So I thought, let's keep trying it. And the cognitive things just kept changing. I could speak easier. I could look at something on a bit of paper and see it and focus. I started being able to make out words and read. And it's not like I had to learn how to read again. It's just that those circuits were switching on. So it's not that my brain had forgotten how to do it. It's that something wasn't connecting. So the connections started happening. I could speak easier. I could handle having the kids in my room. I could call them on the phone on the way to school and say some things and be like, used a phone and I spoke to the kids. Like, this is wild. It's wild. And that in itself would give me the good feelings for the whole day. And I would practice zooming right in on those good feelings and basically feeling them so intensely until I would cry. So my goal with these feelings was to make them so big and so wonderful that it brought me to tears. And that was the thing that I felt helped my cells to get to that state of change.
Wow. It is such a journey to go from that fight and flight response that our body is doing, not our thinking, not our frontal cortex. It's our body. It's the prehistoric part of our brain that's involved. And for you to have found safety and to have been courageous going to it, being patient, accepting that a cold was a change, and change isn't linear. Change is not polarized with good and bad. Change is change. So accepting that the cold was just an indication of change. You were having change. You were in touch with your children. Like, I'm just so excited. I'm so excited about what it's doing with you and your family in reconnecting you. And so as you were going through the comeback, right? We're on the comeback journey now. Although it is really important to understand, listeners, that the path of dysautonomia and chronic fatigue is there now. It has been the ability to trigger yourself into a crash, be it through a virus, be it through a stressful situation, is still there. This is not a don't pay attention to your surroundings, just do anything you like, eat whatever you want. This isn't go back to your bad habits. This is keep doing the great work that you're doing, and you will benefit from the rewards of that. And when you've been in such a dark place as you have been, and I have been, the joy is beyond explanation, isn't it? I see it in your smile.
I think that um, it's not about fixing the thing and getting back to where you came from. I think it's about I essentially feel like I am a whole new person because I've had to establish what is going to work for my nervous system, for my body, what feels like a yes, and follow that, and that creates my future. So if I go, well, I really want to get back to eating pizza and ice cream and stuff, I probably would trigger things and set some things off. So I choose out of joy and out of my love of feeling good, I choose to eat no gluten, no dairy, low histamine food, real food that grows. That to me is delicious and feels great because it feels like a yes in my body. You couldn't pay me to eat something that does not feel like a yes. It's not worth it to me. Too expensive. Same with watching things. I can watch TV now. Um, I would not watch something scary or triggering or fear-based because I choose not to. I choose to follow joy and the good feelings because even though I don't have the same levels of hypersensitivity now, I still notice the differences in how I feel. And every cell is feeling that. So it's just my choice. Why would I want to live like that, like I used to, and follow those things because that's what is put in front of us, when I've found that if I follow this, then my body responds in this way.
Exactly.
Heavy exercise. I wouldn't do really, really heavy, hard exercise right now because my body would probably say no to that. But it does love to move and it does love to, flow around. I can dance again. I did a Zumba class with my 10-year-old and her friend, and I can go swimming. I can do some Pilates. You follow the things that feel like they give you life, not things that you think you should do because other people are doing it, or things that you used to do, or anything that doesn't feel aligned.
What great advice to be checking in and making sure it's a yes. Now, I know that you had multiple sessions, a long period of sessions at Bringwood with the EE system or enhanced energy system. What made you decide that you would invest more in that?
So after a few months of going and realizing that it was having significant cognitive changes in my body, I didn't have physical changes immediately. The physical changes took longer. I was still using the wheelchair for, a good 12 plus months afterwards, either in it or pushing it. But essentially the cognitive changes had to happen first. It's all that inner connection, communication that's happening and getting the body really starting to fire up again. My parents were taking me to my sessions, so they were quite wonderful. I hadn't seen them at all for 6 months because I didn't see anyone for 6 months. So they were bringing me to my sessions because Adam was working, and they were participating in the sessions as well. They'd go and sit in the recliner chair and rest, and that was great for them. But essentially they were supporting me. We went to Ringwood for a while. We also tried out a couple of other centres around. There's another one in Eltham or Vive that we went to, another one in Preston that we went to. And so they were driving me all around the place. It was an hour wherever we went. I felt like that was my job because my kids were not getting any younger. When I first got sick, they were 6, 9 and 11. And, this had been like 2.5 years since then. So things just kept going. I'd missed all this stuff. I missed teaching my daughter how to read. All this stuff was happening without me. And I thought, well, I need to get myself. And so I knew this was helping, and we decided to invest all of our savings to bring it a little closer to home, just to make it accessible for us, just so that we could use it more often. I had no intention of working in this place. I had no intention of doing much because I was still very just on my healing journey at the time. And I thought, we'll just employ someone to come and run the place. I'll come and spend some time here, and then I'll go home and rest. It took a long time to get it and to find a place and do everything. And what do you know? By the time we get to here, I just keep getting better and better. And I think you never know what's around the corner. And the only way to find out is to keep going and follow the thing that feels like a yes, even when it feels completely out of your comfort zone, but that's the right thing. You just have to follow that and see where it lands, because that's the way.
And again, I'm so thankful because you are literally 5 minutes down the road for me.
Good.
You manifested it, but I just
I
found
think you
it
did
via
too.
a special person. Now, there's another part of the technology that you've accessed as well, a different technology that is an advanced form of heart rate variability reading, which is very, very interesting and shows pretty much a very broad system analysis of your progress. And that is one of the advantages you have that some of the other centres don't.
Yeah, and I think the thing, I guess my perspective was I had experience going to these places, body was starting to work, things were getting easier. Every person that I spoke to told me how hard the recovery would be. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be push and crash and get up again and push and crash. And honestly, it wasn't like that. It had this sense of ease. You know, there was still pain and discomfort. My feet were sore for months and months and months because they'd been like this for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden I started walking and moving. There was a lot of pain. My neck, huge pains all through my body, but it felt like progress. It didn't feel like a new problem, you know? So the recovery in itself didn't necessarily feel like pushing into something that wasn't there and forcing it. It felt like my own body, my cells, my field, I don't know, was expanding and expanding to a point where I could just step into that new change, that new bit, you know, like I felt like things were changing organically inside from a place of sustainability within me. And I really wanted to be able to see what was going on because I guess I had blood tests every few months or so. Things were starting to change. One thing we noticed that was changing was the absorption of food in my body. It normalized and I had not changed what I was eating at all. I ate exactly the same thing every day, but my body was assimilating it. It was absorbing it now. And there were lots of things, and I thought, I want to be able to see this. And so we came across this heart rate variability device that measures 300 heartbeats. It just clips on your wrists, measures 300 heartbeats, and does a really detailed analysis around the communication going on between your heart and your brain. And from all the nervous system things we've learned, so much is governed by this communication between the heart and the brain. And that flows onto all the systems in the body. And so this program is so helpful in seeing a picture of your nervous system, how much is in fight or flight, how much is in survival and rest and digest, neurohormonal regulation, your psycho-emotional state, where your neurotransmitters are at, inflammation, energy centers, all sorts of things. But essentially you can see where you're at and you can see if you go and have a 2-hour session in the room, go and have a rest. You'll sit in there, you know, in a recliner with a blanket, close your eyes, and you think, oh, that was nice. That was relaxing. But then you can come out and we do another scan and then we compare the before and the after and you can see exactly what your body's doing. And our bodies are incredible. It blows my mind, the stuff that can happen while you're essentially resting for 2 hours. Your body is going to work because it's put down. Everything is paused that is usually creating stress on the body. So the body's getting out of that coping mode back into that healing mode, and it knows exactly where to start. It knows the order that it needs to change things in. And essentially, we just need to get out of the way and give it the resources to do it.
Yes, yes. Get out of the way and just do the thing. Well, of course, along came Leigh-Anne. So she's been in data systems for 40 years and she says, hey, let's do a case study with the heart rate variability and use ChatGPT to help us analyze the reports get issued after every session. And I would visit twice a week, occasionally 3 times a week, occasionally have an overnight stay. And in 9 weeks, we had a look at the change during that time. And every system that is measured had gone from completely out of range to closer to normal range. Not necessarily, I was not cured and I'm still not. However, my favourite part of it was looking at the energy centres, and I went from single digits to almost 50%, most of them. And I know that was my proof, and I was able to give that to Jo as evidence that this actually does make things change. And the reason we could prove that is my husband has a electrical device in his spine, like a TENS machine, but internal. And because of that electric machine, he his reading doesn't work on the HRV. And so initially he was getting really frustrated because he wasn't having any change and I was having all this change. But he was feeling better. And we discovered actually, no, it was his
Spinal stimulator, is it?
spinal stimulator. That's it. Yeah. His spinal stimulator was stopping it. So we know that there is a difference between somebody who can be read and somebody who can't. And it isn't a furphy. It's real. So now, Jo, I think that we, for the listeners, need to do an addendum to this. I think that there's more to talk about invisible illnesses, about mitochondria, about an example, or my feeling, which was I felt like I was a mobile phone with a faulty battery that you would charge it, it would say it's charged, and then it would go to empty straight away. Yes. So I was not holding charge until I started at the end of February this year. So I'm now not a broken battery. I do take charge and I manage it. And I have a podcast, which is amazing. So we've got lots more to talk about. So Jo, could you tell me 5 good things that have happened in your recovery? And then we will park today to come back for part 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like when you've been in such a dark, dark place, the tiniest little things feel like magic and they feel so special. When everything is taken away and everyone is taken away and then they slowly start coming back, it's like it's just pure heart-opening joy, which brings more joy, it expands. So the first thing that really, really made a mark in my heart was, so just for the timeline, in March and April, I was in hospital having a pretty terrible experience. I came home. In June, I found Heather the IV lady and I started IVs. In July, I started going to the EE system in Ringwood and then I started regular sessions from there. By November, it was 2 of my kids' birthdays and I'd not been a part of their birthdays for the last few years at all. I literally could not be there for presents, singing happy birthday, let alone cake. I couldn't be around candles, paper. I couldn't be there at all. And in November, I wrapped their birthday presents for the first time. I sat up in bed and I wrapped them all and it still hurt, but it felt so joyful. And I gave them their presents. I was part of their birthdays. I sang happy birthday to them. It was so wonderful. Also that year I was there for Christmas. I'd missed a few Christmases in bed by myself. And I was there for Christmas. I went to my parents' house in my wheelchair. I was, put on silly hats and stuff. It was amazing. I hugged my kids standing up all together for the first time. Amazing. Like a stand-up hug is like a real hug. It just felt so good. And of course, Adam, he is a great big hug, and just standing up and hugging him just felt so incredible. Like that just gives me life. The first time, so during the time when I was in bed, we got a dog because there was not much joy around. And so we decided to inject some joy. and we found this beautiful cavoodle. She was about 1 and she was beautifully quiet. She didn't bark. She just sat under my bed, and I didn't have much of a connection with her. She just sat there quietly, didn't want to come up and bother me, but she was there. And I thought, I just want to be able to sit on the floor and bond with my dog. And eventually I could do that. And I took her for a walk one day by myself. So this is when I was up without the wheelchair, took her for a walk by myself, and she had to do a poo. And she did a poo, and I got the bag and I bent down and I picked it up all by myself, and I felt such joy in that moment. It was like, I was like, oh my gosh, it's like I'm in this magical land where all these things feel like the best thing ever. And I went home, and the kids were out the front, and I was like, kids, and everyone was so happy for me. It was so beautiful. They were right there on the journey, seeing all these firsts for the first time. Another thing which was amazing was last year. So that was, last year in September, we used some credits that we had to go on a holiday. We went up to Queensland. We did the theme parks. We did the fun stuff. It was the first time we'd been and had a fun holiday together since, about 5 years prior. And I was still in the wheelchair at that stage, especially for getting around the theme parks and stuff, massive amounts of walking, and that was fine, I just thought, well, I'm not okay without it, so it is what it is. But it was such a fun holiday, and I really felt like I was a part of things, getting back to it, not going on rides, but I don't need to. I don't know if I will, don't really want to. Um, but I remember coming back from that holiday through the airport. The kids really liked how we got to cut all the lines in the airports because they just, push you through. But I remember coming back, we landed in Melbourne and they brought the wheelchair out to me and I got it and I just pushed it all the way through the airport, got our bags, out to the car. I pushed it the whole way. And that was the point where I went, you know what? I think I'm okay. I think I'm going to return this now. We'd rented it. We didn't want to buy it and own it because everyone really enjoyed it. I think it would have been very hard to let it go if we bought it. And so that was a point where we gave it back. And that point felt scary and terrifying and completely exciting because it's like, all right, what am I going to do now? What's next? So many things feel like the best thing ever and also very scary, but why not just do it anyway and see what happens? Because turns out, long story short, things just get better and better.
They do. And we have to find that way, right? It doesn't happen without work. It doesn't happen without research. It doesn't happen without support. You've got a beautiful family. Your mum and dad are gorgeous. You've got amazing people around you. You've created this wonderful business because you want others to have what you have. And I know as a regular visitor to the centre, even after this morning session, I know how giving you are and how generous you are. I thank you for learning so much that you're able to share, and we will have another extra recording so that we can look at what we haven't uncovered so that we can share more information. So in closing, for now, Jo's story is a living reminder that healing is rarely neat. It is cellular, sensory, spiritual, and often it's invisible long before it becomes seen. If you've been dismissed, disbelieved, or disheartened by the complexity of your own health journey, may Jo's experience spark a different kind of hope, the slow, steady kind that rebuilds from the inside out. To learn more about Jo's work and the Good Energy Room, I will add links into the posts and into the description of this episode, or you can look it up on the internet, thegoodenergyroom.com.au. Until next time, honour your energy, trust your body's whispers, and remember, we are all just one moment away from being suddenly different. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
This has been Suddenly Different. I'm Leigh-Anne Sharland, and I'm so grateful you shared your time with me. If you felt a spark, a tear, or a moment of recognition, I hope you'll pass that gift along by sharing this show. Take a deep breath, trust your path, and I'll meet you back here soon.